Elizabeth, you must have heard in Massachusetts what we heard often in Washington. I don't know. I don't know if Massachusetts can elect a woman statewide.
I did hear that. And you know, this notion of what does a senator look like? On the first day that I announced, I was out, and the coverage was as much about what I was wearing. Now, I'm a little embarrassed to say that when I'm wearing a hot pink jacket. I got a little carried away this morning. It was a dull day. But lots of comments, and still lots of comments, hair and that sort of thing. And one of the cranky columnists instantly labeled me Granny Warren, which had its own little, you know, in case anyone missed the point about what was going on here. On the other hand, it's like a lot of things. Over time, once the TV ads started running, and people, you're in people's kitchens, you're in people's living rooms when you're on TV. And so little kids would come up to me and they'd say, I know you, because they know the people on TV. And I still remember the first time this happened, this little girl looked at me and she said, I know you, you're a senator. Now she was a little previous on that. But I said, yes. I said, I'm running for Senate. I got down on her level and I was looking her in the eye and I said, yes, I'm running for Senate. And I said, because that's what girls do. And she said, just like that. And I said, will you remember that? And she said, yes, I'll remember. And we did pinky promises. But it was part of, I thought, you know, if nothing else comes out of this, you don't know how elections are going to come out. There'd be a lot of little ones who said, that's what girls do. And I'll tell you this, there were also a lot of very senior women who said, that's what girls do, and were really out there. I mean, it is a reminder. It stirs something that people say, why, we have to think again about what leadership means. We have to think again about our own vision of how we build a future for ourselves and for all of our children.
So Mazie and Tammy served in the House before and now crossed the rotunda, which I did a few years back. And I'm going to ask each of you, start with Mazie. What do you know to be the difference between the two institutions after 60 days?
I think the dynamics are really different because the fewer members makes a huge difference. And yes, intellectually, I knew there are 100 versus 435 in the Senate, but when you in the House. But when you come here, I think just the dynamics of it. I'm still getting my sea legs and figuring out the lay of the land. The rules are different. The minority matters in the House. It's majority rules. So I'm looking for more opportunities to work across the aisle. I'm looking for those opportunities to get to know my colleagues in ways that I hope having the fewer numbers will enable me to do.
Tammy, what have you noticed?
Well, a lot of differences, and most pronounced the one that Mazie started with in terms of, you know, I can get to know 99 people on a much deeper level and find common ground than I could with 434 counterparts in the House. But I think maybe on a lighthearted level, the biggest difference I noticed is presiding in the House versus presiding in the Senate. There's action. It's action-packed when you're presiding in the House of Representatives, and the presiding officer, you know, is really directing things, and you're the one who gives somebody recognition and cuts them off if the House is, you know, not in order, and you know, that sort of thing. So I had occasionally watched the Senate and said, oh, they're in this quorum call, and what exactly is that? And so presiding, it's quieter. How's that?
I'm sure.
The thing they told us in the Senate was that we were going to have more time to reflect and dwell. That hasn't happened yet. I'm waiting for that.
And so Heidi, coming from North Dakota politics, one congressional district, a big state, one congressional district, to Washington in this political arena, coming into the Senate, has this been a culture shock?
I think I share the frustration of a lot of governors. You know, I'm an attorney general. There's other people here whose previous job, like Tom Udall and Sheldon Whitehouse and Dick Blumenthal, who were AGs and then elected, along with John Cornyn. And when you're an attorney general, you get up every morning and you say, oh, today we're going to have a discussion about this, and I'm going to bring in staff, and we're going to get it done. We're going to introduce a bill. We're going to lobby for our bill that we introduce. We're going to move the ball forward. We're going to create task forces and collaborate on issues, and you feel like you are in charge. Here it is completely different, because you have to convince 60 people that you should be in charge of any one issue. And that, I think that's a big change for me, not feeling like I can self-direct, that we now are in a collaborative process and that I need to be collaborative. Not that I'm not collaborative, not that I'm not that person, but it just is a different feel. And I think occasionally I will talk to my colleagues who have been governors or have been AGs, and we express the same level of frustration.
Elizabeth, you, of course, been sitting at the witness table at many of these hearings, and now you're up on the other side asking the questions.
It's better to be on the other side.
Better to be on the other
yeah,
side.
yeah, I'll go for that.
What is your impression of this Senate institution?
You know, what surprised me most, I think, about the Senate is there are a lot of tools to have an impact on change, a lot to affect change, to make something happen. You know, like anyone who took civics in junior high school, I understand that the Congress passes laws and we orient most of what we do around legislation, and it's about how to make these legislative changes. But those are tough. Those are slow. It takes a lot of pieces. But it's to think about there are other things here too. So for example, there are a lot of laws that are already out there that are in place, and we have agencies that are supposed to be enforcing those laws. The Senate has a real role to play in holding accountable those agencies and our other government officials. And, you know, I want to be fair about this. Some agencies get a lot of lobbying from high-powered interest groups who have lots of money to spend and lots of lobbyists to hire. They get that every day, and it's like the wind always blows from the same direction. Well, you can come back in from the United States Senate and push back a little bit the other way and remind those folks about the public interest and how there are a lot of us watching on the other side and a lot of us who are going to be affected by what you do. I kind of think maybe that makes things work a little bit.
Kind of leads into my question here. When you look at the approval rating of Congress, not that good. And we're usually right around used car salesman or some other category here. We worked hard to get here. We love this institution. We love this country. We believe we can be part of making it a better country. As you look at the Senate, what you've seen of it here, how do you believe we can change this to make it more respected, more effective?
We can start by, I think one of the immediate intense frustrations is that they've seen both houses of Congress manufacture these crises, and we've been going from crisis to calamity to cliff to, well, give me another
Disaster.
alliteration.
Yeah.
And they just want us to come together and govern. Now, we know how hard that is, especially when some of the values and ideological divisions are deep. But, you know, I am privileged to have the opportunity to try to be a part of changing that. And when I am learning more and more about the Senate, I think the fact that you can really establish relationships and find common ground are going to aid that. And, you know, just going to work really hard to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. There's one thing you women do, I understand, that no men are invited to. Is there not a monthly dinner, usually, at different senators?
We're not telling.
No,
I'm
I
sorry.
heard.
If we told you, we'd have to.
I
kill you.
know you
We
would.
can't do
I
this.
know you would, but
I
I
think you're a
don't.
gate crasher.
The word,
Durbin, we are never
the
telling
word's
you.
out. The word's out, and I
Maybe
understand.
one day we'll let enlightened men like you.
It'll ruin everything. But I understand you do get together on a bipartisan basis.
We do.
That's a good thing. Tell me how that's been. How those dinners have come along.
Well, we've had one lunch, and you know the person who convenes us is Barbara Mikowska. She's a little busy right now. But
The new chairman of the Appropriations Committee.
I think, though, that as a general proposition, women do work in a much more collaborative way. And I'm hopeful that with 20 women that we're going to be able to find ways that we can influence this process in a way that is going to be much more positive. I like the legislative arena because it does require us to work with other people. I consider that a very creative process, creative part of what we do. And you know, we did manage to pass a surface transportation bill in a bipartisan way. We did manage to pass an aviation bill in a bipartisan way. And hope springs eternal for all of us, otherwise we wouldn't be here.
I would like to just comment about your previous question, which is what's going to improve our reputation. I think taking responsibility. I think one of the things that the American public watched last week is everybody saying it's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault, when it's everyone's fault. Because we're here, and even if we weren't here to vote for sequestration, which none of us, well, you two were on the other side, but Elizabeth and I were not there, but we're responsible for making the changes. And so, you know, I think if we can all agree that we're responsible, that we have an obligation to do our jobs, and that we're willing to take responsibility and not try and point fingers and blame other people and just get the job done, I think people will say, there's the adults in the room, and that's what they're looking for.
You know, I'll build on what you said because I think you're right about that point, Heidi. And the whole notion that it's as if you can't concede any ground. Yeah. Look, there are some fair points made on both sides. And if we'd be willing to say, yeah, some of this is right, and not feel like, then what's going to happen is somebody's going to scissor it out and say, oh, you know, try to make something out of it that it's not. But to acknowledge there's some real truth in what everybody's trying to get at here. Now, there are real differences. I don't mean to paper over those. And those differences, we have to hammer out. That's what the democratic process is about. I believe in majority vote. That's how this works. But being able to acknowledge the places where we should be able to agree, I think has been something that seems to have been lost. And I don't think anybody likes that.
Well, I think your summary is right in terms of where we need to go as an institution. And your presence will make a big difference. This, as we tape this show, this week in Illinois, one of my dear friends passed away. Her name was Dawn Clark Netsch. And you probably have heard her name, Tammy, up in Wisconsin. An amazing woman. She really ushered in the modern era of women in Illinois politics. And she was a delightful law school professor, Northwestern, on to elected office as state senator, then state comptroller. And I thought, you know, how did Dawn open that door for so many women in our state? Well, first, she was gifted, very smart, and she was persistent, never stopped, and very patient. And she made such a difference on our political scene. And each of you brings that to this institution. And I thank you for coming here and joining us for this little show going back to Illinois, and I'm looking forward to our service together. And I want to thank all of you who've joined us for this Capitol Report, A Different View. Maybe I'll see you in Madison, Wisconsin someday, or maybe in Madison County, Illinois. But wherever it is, I hope to see you next time for our Capitol Report, A Different View. Thank you.